camera doesn't have to lie. It just has to start late. Mara Voss would understand that before sundown, after the dog was blamed, after the medicine warmed, after the first boat burned. But at 0806, with the Mercy Channel convoy 6 minutes from departure, all she saw was Rook staring into the dark gap beside a clean refrigerated medical container. Cold vapor spilled from the door seal and crawled over the hot deck, dying in white strips before it reached her boots. The lock was clean. The seal sat flat and bright under the port sun. A green temperature light blinked on the panel, small and nervous, fighting heat that already had the metal sweating. Rook was not looking at the door. The Malinois mix stood rigid, shoulders high, nose angled past the hinges. Every nerve aimed at the narrow black space between containers where diesel, cold sterile plastic, salt, and a human sourness seemed to snag and vanish. Cranes. Ground overhead, men shouted departure times. The deck under Mara's palm had gone hot enough to sting. Rook's nails ticked once, twice, then stopped. He looked back at her, not asking, reporting. She had learned to hate that look, the one that gave too little and demanded too much. Mara lifted her hand. The loading line froze in pieces. The nearest crewman, the forklift, the tie-down team who had been pretending not to watch the dog. One man stepped away from her as if bad judgment might be contagious. Captain Lena Haddad turned from the gangway with the kind of calm that meant anger had already found a chair and sat down. "We clear in 6, she said, not 7. Mara kept her eyes on the gap. Hold the Tomas Vale. Halfway up the ladder with a clipboard tucked under his arm and sweat running down his neck, made a strangled sound and slapped one hand against the cold chain panel, as if touch alone could keep the cargo alive. Condensation broke under his palm. "That box is insulin and pediatric antibiotics," he said. "It is also not leaving if the dog is right." Haddad stepped closer. "And if he is wrong?" A dockhand brushed past Mara's left side too hard, and the old ache in her arm answered like a bad habit. She did not look away from Rook. "Then I pay for it." Nobody laughed. Good. A joke would have made the order feel cheaper. 1. They searched the container twice. Then the gap, then the underside, the latch housings, the bracing, the straps, the low shadow where a smaller person could have crouched if a smaller person had been there. Nothing. No bomb, no contraband. No torn bag. No wire. No chemical bite in the air. No hidden package taped behind a support. No clean answer for a dog who had never liked drama, unless a human had trained it into him. The longer they found nothing, the louder the port became. Men who had been whispering started speaking at normal volume, which was worse. Someone laughed once, too sharp, and cut himself off. Rook panted under Mara's hand. Hot now, less certain, his gaze sliding from the gap to her face and back again. The cargo alarm did not sound. The green light stayed green. That should have helped. It did not. Haddad did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Security lead remains on deck watch. Route calls come through me until further notice. It was not a demotion on paper. Paper was polite. Everyone heard it anyway. Tomas pulled his hand from the cold panel like it had burned him. The Mercy Channel clock had not stopped while they proved nothing. The convoy left late. Not ruined, not canceled, not safe. Late, in port 6 minutes could look small to people who had never watched timing turn into blood. Mara stood near the rail as the last lines came in and the aid vessel shouldered away from the staging pier. White logo bright against the hull, cold boxes humming behind her like a conscience with poor manners. Rook pressed close to her left knee, still unsettled. Haddad gave orders from the bridge wing, clipped and correct. Tomas stayed near the refrigerated stack, touching seals he had already checked, checking them again because hands needed work when trust had gone sour. Mara let the crew's anger move around her. It was deserved enough to be useful. Past the harbor mouth, small boats worked the chop in ordinary patterns, or patterns trying hard to look ordinary. Heat blurred the water until hulls seemed to slide on glass. One wake bent against the traffic, then another crossed it too late, the water folding in a way the boats themselves did not explain. A deckhand beside her squinted at the hulls. They're just fishing boats. Mara felt her left hand tighten on the rail, slow and painful. She watched the water, not the boats. Don't watch the boat. Watch what it made the water do. Outside the harbor, the wake lines turned where no convoy wake should turn and kept turning toward them now. The Mercy Channel convoy made open water late, and the sea answered with noise. Engines pressed through the soles of Mara's boots, rigging snapped, radios clicked, and water slapped the hull in bright, impatient bursts. The crew had gone quiet in the worst way. Men and women who had been joking at the pier now moved like every motion might be judged later, which it probably would be. Haddad kept them on course because turning back would strand hospitals that had no vote in the matter. Tomas stayed near the refrigerated stack, one hand braced on a rail, eyes counting boxes as if counting could cool them. Rook leaned against Mara's leg, still hot, still unhappy, ears working through the engine noise. The wakes ahead did not settle into the route. They crossed, faded, returned. Mara watched one thin line curve where no small craft had any reason to turn. Then smoke lifted beyond the lead vessel, black at the base and gray at the edges. A boat came out of it sideways, burning low and moving wrong. It was not racing them. It had the helpless drift of something placed badly on purpose, close enough to force the convoy to choose between collision, rescue, and looking away while people watched from every rail and phone nearby. The deck changed, all at once. Someone shouted port side, someone else shouted starboard, and neither word helped. The burning boat cut across the convoy's path, close enough for heat to ride the wind and slap faces backward. A man tumbled against the rail. Another went down hard on one knee and did not get up fast. Eli was already moving before Mara saw him decide. He slid between two cargo straps, dropped beside the injured deckhand, and caught the man's head before it struck metal a second time. "Hold him still," he snapped, not looking up. "Not like that. Like you mean it." Smoke dragged over the water and made distance stupid. The deck rolled under them, wet in patches from spray and old firefighting runoff, and every brace had to be found twice, a crewman near Mara said. That sound came from aft. Eli barked a dry little laugh while planting one boot against a tie-down ring. Sound lies at sea. He glanced at Mara once. "Ask the people who spent years thinking an icequake was a sea monster." Mara stepped over a coil of line and grabbed the rail as the vessel lurched. Save the lecture for the monster. Eli's mouth twitched. His hands did not stop. The wounded man tried to rise, failed, and left a wet red print on the deck. Phones came up. That was the part Mara hated, because it looked like fear and curiosity and evidence all wearing the same cheap shirt. Two crewmen were filming the burning boat. A man near the service ladder was not. He held his phone low, angled toward Eli, steady and away. Panic never managed. The screen did not chase flames or wreckage. It held Eli's sleeve, Eli's face, the red smear under his hand. Natty, moving past with a coil of emergency line over one shoulder, saw Mara see it. Her eyes narrowed, then flicked away. Local, practical, not ready to name what she could not yet prove. Rook stiffened. Not toward the burning boat, not toward the injured man. His nose dropped toward the cargo lane between the refrigerated containers and the lashed pallets, where smoke had crawled low and bodies had rushed past too quickly. Mara followed him, one hand in his harness, letting the dog lead only as far as the queue allowed. Human presence. she reminded herself. Not guilt, not truth. Someone hidden and terrified. The dog nosed past a loose strap, stopped, then looked at the shadow under the medical cartons. His body said person, not threat, and that distinction mattered more than pride. They found the boy wedged behind a pallet of wrapped medical cartons, knees tucked under his chin, one fist tangled in a strip of cold packing cloth. 10, maybe 11. Dust on his face, salt-dried white at his hairline. His eyes went not to Mara, not to Rook, not to the injured man groaning behind them, but to the phones. He turned his face into the pallet like a camera could bite. Rook whined once, high and frustrated, then looked back at Mara. Noise is not intent. She said it under her breath and hated how badly she needed it to be true. Easy, she added, crouching low enough that the boy could see her hands. You're safe on this ship? He shook his head so hard, his teeth clicked. Eli looked over from the deckhand, blood on one sleeve now, his expression losing its sarcasm. The low phone near the service ladder shifted with Eli's face. Haddad's voice cracked from the bridge wing, demanding status. Tomas muttered something about exposed cargo and then stopped, seeing the child. The boy swallowed air twice before words came. No, he said. Medicine ship burns first. Samir's words sat on the deck like another piece of burning wreckage. Medicine ship burns first. Nobody had a clean place to put that. Haddad wanted distance from the burning boat and a steadier lane through the channel. Tomas wanted the cold boxes shaded, sealed, watched, saved from heat and panic and whatever came next. Eli wanted the injured man moved before the man stopped being a man and became a weight. Mara wanted all of it at once, which was how bad calls got dressed up as leadership. Smoke still smeared the water behind them. Rook stood near her knee, panting harder than he had at the pier, nose working without committing. The boy crouched behind the wrapped cartons with Nettie beside him, one hand raised to keep curious crew back. Mara pointed toward the starboard passage, the shorter route around the cold chain stack. Move the wounded through there. Keep the kid low. Haddad cut across her before the nearest deckhand took 2 steps. No, that lane bottles them against the rail. Mara saw it half a second late. Too many bodies, one narrow turn. No room if the deck jumped. Haddad's eyes stayed on the crew, not Mara, center lines. Now, it was the right call. Annoying how often survival had poor manners. The first impact came before Mara could answer. Not a clean shot, not a movie crack, more a hard metal slap that snapped every head toward the bow. A second strike chewed paint from the line housing and sent a crewman flat to his stomach. People moved wrong at first because people always did. Away from noise, toward blockage, into each other. Haddad's voice cut through it, sharp enough to do work. Mara used it, hated needing it, and drove 2 crewmen back from the starboard rail with one arm while her bad left throbbed under the strain. Down and in, hands visible. Keep the lanes open. Eli dragged his patient by the shoulders just far enough to clear a spill of line, not far enough to pretend the man was fine. If anyone plants hands to panic, he said, breath short, do it alphabetically. Nobody laughed. Still, the words put enough shape into the air to help. Rook barked once toward the bow, then checked himself and looked to Mara, frustrated by too many scents and too much heat. A signal is only useful if you survive long enough to read it. Right now she needed bodies moved more than certainty. Nadi rose from beside Samir, not fully, just enough to see over the cargo stack. Her gaze did not follow the smoke or the small boats. It went to hands, phones, faces turned too carefully away. She said. They are still watching the medic, she said. Sevik quiet, not the boxes. Him. Mara followed the line of her eyes. A man in a gray shirt near the aft service ladder held his phone low again. almost bored, angled past the burning water and toward Eli's blood-slick sleeve. When the deck lurched, he steadied the phone before he steadied himself. Fear did not do that. Purpose did. Tomas swore under his breath and shoved his shoulder against a refrigerated pallet that had started to walk free of its braces. The cold indicator on one side blinked amber, tiny and stupid in the sun. He grabbed a torn strap with both hands and leaned his whole weight back. "This one goes over. We lose half the burn stock," he said. No lecture. No numbers. Just his body between future patients and open deck. Another impact kicked the hull. The line station alarm yelped once, then died. Mara looked forward and saw no crewman at the station where there had been 1 minute earlier. She ran because the empty space was worse than the noise. Wet metal slapped under her boots. Salt and smoke burned in her throat. Rook surged with her, then checked hard when she snapped 2 fingers low, keeping him off the worst tangle of line. The line station had become a bad little painting. Blood on white paint, a snapped hook swinging loose, rope fibers frayed bright as hair, the deck access gate half open and shuddering, with each roll. The missing crewman lay folded against the base of the housing, eyes open, breath sawing, one hand still gripping a length of line, as if the ship might behave if he asked firmly enough. Mara dropped beside him long enough to press his shoulder down and see the gap beyond the damaged station. Not wide. Wide enough. A small craft could ride that blind angle. A man could catch the broken housing, pull, and come over before the deck team saw more than hands. Haddad reached the comms behind her, already calling bodies away from the exposed rail. Eli shouted for a kit. Nadi pulled Samir lower behind the cargo. Tomas kept fighting the pallet. Mara looked at the blood, the open gate, the water rising and falling just beyond it. Whoever had hit them was close enough to board. The first hands came over the damaged line station before Eli reached the kit. Not many. Enough. A dark glove hooked the broken housing. Then another found the rail, and the deck seemed to tilt toward the problem like a drunk deciding where to fall. Mara was already moving. The line station smelled of hot rope, salt, oil, and fresh blood. A thin rainbow skin had spread over the wet metal near the housing, pretty in the insulting way dangerous things sometimes were. One crewman stepped onto it, and his feet went out from under him. So fast he hit the deck before he made a sound. The surface lies. Mara saw the shine, the white aid logo beyond it, the open lane toward the refrigerated stack, and the center line Haddad had barely kept alive. She did not see a clean fight. Clean fights belonged to briefing rooms and men who had never slipped in blood. Haddad shouted from behind her, driving crew inward, keeping them from flooding the blind rail. Good. Let the captain hold the ship together. Mara had the ugly little opening in front of her, and the first boarder was already coming through it. Rook hit the space beside Mara, not the man, and that saved her from making him into a miracle. The dog drove pressure into the gap, teeth flashing, body low, forcing the boarder to hesitate long enough for Mara to slam her shoulder into the man's chest and knock him off balance, against the housing. Her left arm caught the rail wrong. Pain tore from elbow to shoulder, white and mean, and for a second her grip simply vanished. The boarder seized that second. He drove forward, not with style, just weight and fear and a hard forearm that clipped her jaw. Mara tasted salt and copper. Rook tried to adjust, paws skidding on the oil sheen, nails scraping uselessly over the wet metal. His right rear paw slipped again, smaller this time, but enough for Mara to see the risk turning under him like a loose bolt. Too hot, too slick, too much shouting. She grabbed his harness with her right hand and hauled him back before his momentum carried him into the rail. Back, she said, rougher than she wanted. He obeyed, furious and panting. chest heaving under her hand. Alive. Useful. Limited, that had to be enough. The boarder lunged again. Mara let the deck roll do part of the work, and drove him sideways into the container ridge, pain flaring through the bad arm. Behind her, Eli dragged the fallen crewman by the collar until the man's boots cleared the oil. "Do not stand up," he snapped when the crewman tried to help, which was very human and very stupid. "Your skull just voted no." He pressed a bandage hard enough to make the man swear, then looked past Mara and went pale around the mouth. Tomas was at the cold chain stack, not reading labels now, not counting. He had both hands on a crate that had broken loose, knees bent, back shaking, trying to keep it from sliding into the open deck lane. Another crewman joined him. The crate shifted anyway, tearing a cooling hose free with a short, ugly hiss. Cold vapor spilled into smoke and turned dirty before it touched the deck. The torn hose bucked once, spraying frost that vanished almost instantly in the heat. The cargo alarm chirped and chirped, a small electronic panic. Nobody had a hand free to soothe. Haddad's orders kept coming, clipped and clean, moving uninjured crew away from the rail and injured crew toward the center. Natty had Samir pressed low behind the wrapped cartons, one arm across the boy's shoulders, her head turned toward the men still holding phones. The attackers were not rushing the highest value containers. They shoved, struck, feinted, and kept pulling the mess toward the white container with the largest aid mark. One attacker could have cut toward the smaller pharmaceutical case Tomas had nearly died protecting. He did not. Another had a clear path to the cargo latch, with only a loose strap in his way. He ignored it and drove a bleeding deckhand backward until the man's shoulder hit the white logo painted across the container side. A phone lifted somewhere beyond the smoke. Not high, not obvious. Just enough to catch the mark, the blood. Mara with her jaw split and her hand clenched in the front of a man's shirt. A second attacker slapped the container side, not to open it, just to make the sound pull faces and cameras there. Mara threw the first man off her, not cleanly, and he crashed against the container, leaving a dark streak under the printed dove. Rook barked again, hoarse now, then coughed in the heat. Mara's arm pulsed so hard she could feel each beat in her teeth. Nobody was stealing the expensive medicine. Nobody was even trying properly. They were dragging violence into the cleanest frame on the ship. Mara looked from the ignored cargo to the white aid logo and felt the shape of the thing change. It was still an attack. It was also a picture being built around them. Mara stayed in the shot longer than she wanted. The white aid logo filled the container side behind her, too clean around the blood, too bright under the glare. Smoke dragged low across the deck. Cold vapor leaked from the torn hose and died dirty against hot metal. The man she had thrown off her rolled once and did not try to stand. Tomas was still fighting the loose crate with a crewman beside him, both slick with sweat, both pretending a damaged strap was a plan. Eli had one hand pressed to the fallen crewman and the other reaching blind for tape, gauze, anything that kept a body in the present tense. Nadi had Samir low behind the cartons. Haddad's orders kept the center line from turning into a stampede. The phones kept rising at the logo, at Mara, at the blood on a container meant to make the world feel civilized. A boarder near the rail could have gone for a smaller case and did not. He shoved a crewman sideways instead, closer to the painted dove. The camera followed the shove, not the cargo. A fresh shout came from the line station, and two crewmen flinched toward the rail before Haddad barked them back. Mara looked past the boarders and saw the pattern settle into place. They had left the expensive cases alone. They had ignored smaller cases, the ones Tomas had nearly broken himself to save. Every shove, every strike, every feint pulled bodies toward the bright mark and the open angle beyond the smoke. A camera did not need the whole deck. It needed a clean symbol and a dirty second. The thought landed with a sick little click. There was no mystery in stealing medicine if theft was the point. There was plenty of value in making a mercy ship look armed, guilty, and unfit for the corridor that fed half-starved clinics downstream. A phone near the service ladder lifted again. Late. It caught Eli kneeling in blood, Mara standing over a downed man, Rook barking with his teeth bared. It missed the boarder's first grab. It missed the broken station. It missed Samir hiding from every lens like the lenses had teeth. Another boarder slapped the container side, not to open it, just to pull eyes there. The sound rang bright and stupid. Mit. The phone followed. Rook pushed forward at the next surge, then slowed so sharply, Mara felt it through the harness. His breath came harsh and wet. His ears flattened under the deck noise. Heat rolled off his coat when her hand touched him. Not warmth, real heat. He scanned too wide, then snapped back to her face, overloaded and angry at his own body. "Easy," she said, and hated that the word was for both of them. Another impact shuddered through the hull. A small speaker crackled somewhere beyond the smoke, cheap and distorted, or maybe a phone on open audio. The voice that came through was controlled enough to make the noise around it seem childish. "Eli Roark," it said. Eli's head came up. Not much. Enough. Mara saw the blood drain from his expression before the sarcasm could get there and defend him. The voice continued, almost bored. "Tell him to keep his hands where we can see them." That was all. No speech. No flag. No lecture about causes or corridors. Dict. Just a name placed on the deck like a blade. Eli was no longer only the medic in the blood. He had become a handle, and someone outside the smoke had closed a fist around it. Mara looked at Natty, and Natty's face confirmed the ugly arithmetic, the watcher near the ladder. The phones, Eli helping in the open, because that was what decent people did before someone found a way to price it. Haddad snapped something into the radio. Tomas cursed at the damaged hose and dragged the loose crate back 2 inches, losing 3 to the roll. Rook staggered half a step and recovered, panting hard, ashamed as if shame belonged to dogs. It did not. "Back him off," Eli said without looking away from his patient. "He's cooking." Mara wanted the dog at her side. Wanting was a luxury item. She pulled Rook into the strip of shade beside the container and felt him resist, then yield. The camera near the ladder shifted with her, hungry for the wrong second. Mara understood then that every necessary move had become material. Every shove, every body dragged clear, every order shouted from a humanitarian deck could be cut loose from its cause. A camera doesn't have to lie. It just has to start late. The voice beyond the smoke said Eli's name again, softer this time, and Eli finally looked at Mara like his compassion had just been mapped and marked for collection. The next pressure came from inside the ship, not over the rail. A crewman staggered out of the service passage below the cargo deck, coughing so hard he folded at the waist. Heat rolled out behind him with the engine noise, thick and metallic, full of oil and old salt. He pointed back into the narrow passage and tried to speak. Only half a word came out. Mara looked once at Rook. The dog strained toward the opening, furious to work, but the moment the sound hit him, he flinched. Not fear. Overload. The passage swallowed noise and threw it back in pieces. Metal vibration came up through the deck. Hot air pressed under the dog's muzzle. Rook's gaze scattered, then locked on Mara, asking for a job his body could not safely do. Eli had said he was cooking. Eli had been right, the smug bastard. Mara unclipped the short lead from her belt and handed it to Natty. "Keep him back." Rook lunged once, checked himself, and whined low enough to hurt. "He's not a tool. He overheats like the rest of us." Then she ducked into the service passage without him. Inside, Sound turned solid. The engine roar flattened voices into shapes. A warning light blinked somewhere ahead, useless and red. The ceiling sat too low, the walls too close, the rails sweating under Mara's right hand. Her left arm pulsed from the fight on deck, a deep, ugly throb that had stopped pretending it was old. The passage bent hard around a ladder well and narrowed at the turn, forcing bodies into each other. A man came at her out of the dim space, all shoulder and panic, and there was no room for clean movement. He hit her bad side. Her hand failed on the rail. For one stupid second, she had nothing. No dog, no angle, no strong arm, just heat and metal and the taste of smoke still in her mouth. She dropped her weight before he could drive her into the wall. They struck the side panel together. Pain opened white behind her eyes. He grabbed at her vest, not skilled, just desperate, and that made him harder to read. Mara found the rail again with her right hand and used the ship's lurch to break the pressure between them. Pretty had stayed upstairs with the cameras. Eli reached the passage behind her with a medical bag thumping against his thigh and two crewmen dragging a third between them. The injured man's boots left wet streaks on the metal. Eli took one look and stopped being clever. That frightened Mara more than the blood. "Put him down," he said, too quiet. They did. The passage gave them no room, so they made room with knees and shoulders and bad language. Mara kept herself between Eli and the dim bend ahead while he worked. She heard the rhythm change in his breathing. Heard the tiny pause when a man who knew bodies understood one had gone beyond bargaining. Ellie. He did not answer. His hands moved once more, then stopped. His shoulders stayed set for a second longer than they needed to, as if refusal could hold a pulse in place. Then they dropped. The ship shook around them as if offended by stillness. Eli sat back on his heels, blood on both wrists now. No. One word. Not a prayer. Just a door closing. Past him, tucked under a grated step, Mara saw a strip of cold packing cloth caught on a jagged screw. Small fingers had twisted it into knots. Beside it, scratched into grime, was a child's mark, a rectangle, a flame, 3 little circles like lenses. Mara stared at it while the service passage hammered around her. The attackers had not chased cargo down here. They had chased a path. Samir's path. From the cargo lane, through the service shadow, away from cameras or toward the only places a child thought cameras could not see. A smear of ash marked the lower wall where a small shoulder might have brushed it. The dead crewman at Eli's knees had not died because medicine was valuable. He had died in the lane between the boy and whoever wanted him erased, taken, or framed. Eli saw Mara's face and followed her eyes to the scratched grime. The old sarcasm did not come back. Outside the passage, Rook barked once and then fell into a ragged pant, held back by Natty's voice. Mara's left arm shook so badly she had to pin it against her ribs. She wanted to go back to thinking in boxes, cargo, route, attackers, ship. Boxes at least sat where you put them. Children ran. Witnesses got hunted. The camera trap had a living fuse, and he was 10 or 11 and hiding behind medicine because medicine had seemed safer than people. Mara looked toward the stair, toward heat and smoke and phones waiting above them. "It's not the cargo," she said. "It's Samir." Samir was where Natty had left him, wedged low behind the wrapped cartons, both hands locked around the strip of cold packing cloth, like it was the last honest thing on the ship. Smoke had thinned enough to make the phones easier to see. That made him worse. Every time a lens lifted, even by accident, the boy turned his face into the cargo until his cheek pressed flat against the plastic wrap. His knuckles whitened around the cloth. His breath came in small, swallowed bursts, as if noise might make him visible. Men with weapons had made him shake. Cameras made him disappear. Mara came out of the services passage with her left arm pinned tight and Eli's dead crewman still in her head, and she had to force herself not to turn the boy into an answer. That was the old trap. See a signal. See. Name it too fast. Pay for it later. Rook strained against Nadi's grip, overheated and furious, then froze when Samir jerked away from a phone near the rail. The dog's nose dipped toward the boy, then toward the cold cloth, then back to Mara. Stress. Medicine. Plus. Handler tension. A dozen things. None of them truth. Mara crouched until her bad arm screamed. Samir, she said. Look at me. Not them. Me. The boy's eyes flicked to her, black and wet and older than they had any right to be. They wait, he whispered. His English broke around the words, but the pictures came through clear enough. Before fire. Men wait, phones up. He made a small square with his fingers, then flinched from his own hands. Boat, not burning yet. They watch, then fire, then shouting. He pressed the cold cloth to his mouth, as if that could hold the rest in. Mara wanted names, direction, count, anything useful enough to justify what they had already lost. Wanting it did not make a child into a report. Rook whined low, staring at Samir's knees now, not his face. Mara felt the ugly pull of overcorrection. After the container, she could dismiss the dog. After the container, she could believe him too much. Both roads ended in the same ditch. Noise is not intent. She said it more to herself than to the boy. Rook was cueing fear and residue and heat, not guilt. Samir was not a package, not proof. He was a frightened witness with dirty hands and a memory full of cameras. That was worse than proof. Proof could be locked away. A living boy had to be moved. The next strike hit the deck hard enough to knock dust from the cargo straps. The explanation died where it belonged, unfinished. A shout rolled over the container stack, not from the rail this time. Closer. Nadi moved before Mara could order it, shoving Samir sideways under the shadow of the cold chain frame and driving two stunned crewmen with him. Move or be scenery, she snapped, which was not elegant and did not need to be. Rook lunged toward the impact, slipped half a step, recovered badly, and stared at Mara with rage in his overheated body. She pointed him back with two fingers and hated herself for the relief when he obeyed. Eli came up from the service passage behind her, pale around the mouth, one sleeve dark to the elbow. Tell me we are not chasing ghosts now, he said. No, Mara said. They're chasing him. Eli looked at Samir, then at the phones, and understood enough to lose whatever joke he had been building. A boarder slammed through the smoke near the center line. Eli shoved a crewman out of the way and caught the blow meant for the lane, going down hard against the cargo frame. Another man caught his shoulder and pinned him there, half hidden behind the white container edge, one knee jammed against the spilled wraps. Mara started toward him and stopped because the camera near the ladder turned with her. That was the trap in its cleanest shape. Eli under pressure, Samir being shoved low through cargo, Rook panting himself raw, Mara one step from violence in front of the largest aid mark on the deck. The voice from beyond the smoke returned, calmer than the ship around it. Bring the boy out. Not shouted. Offered. Like a transaction. Eli had one knee under him, one arm trapped, his face turned toward Mara with a look that said, do not spend the kid for me, and also maybe hurry, because pain made philosophers of nobody. Nadi dragged Samir behind a stack of cartons, using her body to block him from both the smoke and the lens. The open deck beyond them was the only lane left that was not blocked by bodies, cargo, or fire. Haddad's voice cracked over the noise, ordering crew away from the exposed rail, buying shape but not rescue. Mara looked at the boy, the camera, the white logo. Then Eli pinned in the smoke. The enemy did not need her to be wrong, he needed her visible, and the only way forward was across the open deck. The open deck looked shorter until Mara had to cross it. Then it became a country. Wind cut through the smoke and flattened it in strips. Heat lifted off the metal. Torn straps snapped against cargo frames with a sound like small, angry flags. The white aid logo sat ahead of her, bright and patient, waiting to be useful to the wrong people. Eli was pinned near its edge, not helpless, not free. Samir moved low with Nadi behind the cargo lane, every step a fight against panic. Rook pressed against Mara's leg, ribs pumping, tongue dark, body still asking for work. She put one hand on his overheated neck and felt the decision before she liked it. His collar was wet under her fingers. One paw trembled against the deck, then steadied badly. "No charge," she said. The dog stared at her, insulted by biology. "Che, stay with Natty," he resisted. Then sagged back because even fury needed oxygen. Good dog. Poor bastard. Mara stepped out without him fully at her side, and the cameras found her before the men did. The first few steps were all glare and wind, and her left arm threatening mutiny. A signal is only useful if you survive long enough to read it. She kept reading anyway. Open lane. Hidden child. Phones waiting for the ugly part. Tomas was halfway under a loosened cargo net when she reached the first stack, both arms wrapped around a case that had shifted against the blocking lane. His face was red, wet, furious. "Not that one," he said before she even touched it. "That is burn stock. Actual burn stock, Mara." His voice cracked on her name, which was worse than shouting. Behind him, a smaller pallet of non-core equipment had jammed against the frame and trapped the lane Natty needed. Not medicine. Not nothing, either. Blankets, splints, field supplies. The useful little things people only called secondary until they were bleeding in the dark. A carton had split at one corner, showing sealed packets inside, clean and pale, and suddenly very fragile. Haddad's voice cut across the deck from the bridge wing. "You cannot stack bodies against that rail. Move them center, or lose them overboard." Again. Right. Again. Not helpful enough. Mara looked at the route, then the cameras, then Samir, trying not to look like a target. "Thomas," she said, "I need the lane." He shook his head once, already understanding, already hating her for making him understand. Future patients are still patients. So are breathing ones, cheap line, true line. Those were usually the worst kind. They sacrificed the secondary pallet because sacrifice sounded noble and this was not. This was Tomas making a wounded little noise as he cut loose cargo he had fought all day to protect. This was two crewmen shoving crates into the exposed gap while wind slapped smoke around their faces. This was Mara using her good shoulder against a frame, feeling her bad arm flare so hard her vision narrowed. The pallet went over enough to break the camera line from the service ladder and fill the lane with cover Nadi could use. It also tore open a carton and spilled pale medical wraps across the deck like shed skin. A smaller case cracked under the load and sprayed sealed packets into oil-black water sliding along the scupper. Tomas grabbed what he could, then stopped when Samir stumbled. He left the supplies and caught the boy instead. That was the cost. Right there, not in a manifest. In the thing a decent man abandoned with both eyes open. Rook barked from behind Natty. Hoarse, trying to work through heat and failure. Mara did not call him forward. She used the shadow of the shifted cargo, crossed 3 more steps, and felt the deck open around her. Eli twisted under the man holding him. Enough to free one hand, enough to point with 2 bloody fingers toward the smoke ahead. Harun Kadir came through it like he had been waiting for the deck to arrange itself around him. No hurry, no grand entrance, just a man in dark clothes with smoke behind him and a camera angle already over his shoulder. Mara knew him before anyone named him, not by face, by the way the violence made room. He looked once at Samir, once at Eli, then at Mara, standing between the logo and the broken cargo lane. His expression did not change. That was almost polite of him. Now, Haddad warned from somewhere behind Mara, voice tight with ship sense. That lane will not hold. Mara did not look back. Tomas was on his knees with one hand still on the boy's shoulder. Natty had the crew moving through the space bought with lost supplies. Rook panted in the shade, shaking with the need to disobey, one foot lifting and setting down again as if the deck hurt him personally. Haroon raised one hand, and a man behind Eli tightened his grip hard enough to make Eli's face go gray. Then Haroon moved first, not a speech. Not a threat dressed up as one. He stepped into the cleanest sightline on the deck and pulled the fight there with him. Haroon moved first, and the deck gave him the picture he wanted. Smoke behind him. White Aid logo to Mara's left. Eli pinned under a man's grip at the edge of the frame. Samir low behind Tomas and Nadi, visible only when the wind tore open the smoke. Haroon did not rush like the boarders had. He stepped into Mara's path and turned his shoulder just enough to put her between him and the camera, riding over his man's shoulder. Clever bastard. The surface lies. It showed Mara advancing on a man who had not yet appeared to touch her. It missed the grip on Eli. It missed the child. It missed Rook, shaking in the shade, too hot and too tired, held back from the work his whole body wanted. Haroon struck with the plain economy of someone who had hurt people before and wasted no theater on it. Mara blocked with her right and felt her left arm answer late, weak, almost gone. Pain ran hot under her collarbone. She lost half a step. Haroon used that half step to drive her toward the logo, his hand flat against her vest, his eyes on the camera more than her face. On camera, it would look like she lunged. In her body, it felt like falling. Wind slapped torn straps against metal. One phone caught only the angle, never the reason. Eli made the first useful mess. Pinned or not, hurt or not, he twisted his trapped arm against the man holding him and drove his boot into a rolling case of spilled wraps. Bite. His breath tore out of him, ugly and thin, and his pinned shoulder dragged hard against the cargo edge. The case skidded across the slick deck and hit Haroon below the knee, not hard enough to drop him, hard enough to steal his balance. Haroon's hand snapped out and caught Mara's vest. Her bad arm tried to close on his wrist and failed. The failure was so complete, it almost felt clean. Her fingers simply would not hold. Haroon saw it. Of course he saw it. He drove her backward toward the logo, toward the clean frame, toward the story he had built. Rook broke from the shade then, not in a glorious charge, more a stagger with teeth and loyalty in it. He hit the empty space beside Haroon's leg, forcing the man to shift, then slipped hard on oil and went down on one shoulder with a yelp that cut through every other sound. Mara's stomach dropped. He scrambled up, limping now, panting too fast, his injured leg barely loading. Useful, hurt, not enough. The deck lurched and nearly took all three of them. Mara stopped trying to win clean. That fantasy had belonged to some other morning, before false alerts and dead crewmen and children hiding from phones. She let Haroon pull her into the visible space, then moved with the pull instead of against it. Her left arm screamed when she hooked it across his shoulder. It nearly folded. For one ugly second it did fold, and Haroon's weight came through the gap. The camera caught her face twisted with pain, not the reason for it. Eli shouted her name, raw and furious. He freed one hand, grabbed the strap hanging from the shifted cargo, and yanked it across Haroon's foot. The move was clumsy, desperate, and perfect. Haroon stumbled. Rook, shaking on three good legs, drove his body into Haroon's blind side and gave Mara one breath of space. Not a takedown, a door. Mara went through it. She slammed Haroon into the damaged container edge with her good shoulder. The impact drove air out of both of them. Harun's elbow caught her bad arm again, and her vision narrowed to a bright pinhole. She kept moving anyway, because stopping would put Eli back in his grip and Samir back in the open. Something gave under Harun. Maybe ribs, maybe the thin lie of balance. His grip broke from Eli. The camera angle lost him in smoke, blood, and the printed dove smeared dark across the container wall. Harun hit the deck hard and stayed there because 3 exhausted bodies made him stay. Mara with one knee down and her right hand locked in his coat. Eli half collapsed against the cargo, frame with blood on his mouth, Rook leaning into Mara's side and trembling like a burned-out engine. Haddad's crew surged only after the motion stopped, not to rescue the fight, but to keep the ship from losing the living pieces left on it. Tomas dragged Samir behind the broken pallet. Natty put herself between the boy and the phones. The cold chain alarm kept chirping from somewhere, stupid and persistent. Smoke opened once, and Mara saw the phone near the service ladder still recording. What it had caught was simple enough to damn her. Mara driving a man down beside a humanitarian logo. Rook lunging in the same frame. Eli on the deck, no clear view of Samir. No clear view of the first grip. No beginning. Just the ugly middle. The sacrificed supplies lay split across the deck. One crewman sobbed without sounds over the covered body near the service passage. Rook sagged against her leg, and Mara put her hand on his hot neck as the lens kept staring. Harun was beaten. The ship was not clean. Somewhere beyond the smoke, the question was already being born. What would the world think happened? The next morning did not arrive clean. It came in flat port light over a deck that looked used up. Torn straps, spoiled cartons, dried blood in the grooves, smoke stains on the white aid logo, salt crust on everything that still pretended to be metal. The Mercy Channel had stayed open, technically, which was the kind of word people used when they wanted survival to sound smaller. 2 crew were in surgery ashore. One was in a covered berth waiting for paperwork no one wanted to sign. Tomas stood beside the damaged cold chain stack with both hands hanging empty, staring at the ruined secondary pallet like apology could refrigerate it. A forklift carried off what remained of the burned stock, less than promised, less than needed. Eli sat on a crate with his ribs taped and one eye swelling shut, awake only because stubbornness had not yet been classified as a medical problem. Rook lay under a strip of shade near Mara's chair, one foreleg wrapped, tongue out, too tired to lift his head when she shifted. That hurt worse than her arm. Her left side had been bandaged tight. It still felt loose, as if the ship had taken something structural out of her and forgotten to say what. The dog had created one opening and paid for it like any other worker on that deck. No medals, no soft music. Just a limp, a cooling mat, and a handler who kept pretending not to count his breaths. The footage played 3 times in the temporary inquiry room. Too small for a courtroom, too official to be honest about being temporary. A white table, 2 folding chairs, a wall fan that clicked every 4th turn, coffee turning sour in paper cups. The clip began late every time. Mara appeared already moving, already violent, framed against the dirty aid logo. Rook lunged in beside her, teeth bright. Eli was on the deck. Harun's first grip was outside the frame. Samir was invisible behind cargo. Nadi's body blocking the phones looked from that angle like concealment. Tomas losing supplies looked like chaos, not sacrifice. The audio tore itself apart in wind and shouting. Anyone watching could make several stories from it, and most of them would travel faster than the truth. The woman across the table watched without expression. Haddad stood at the wall, arms folded, face carved from a week of bad sleep. She had given her report. It had helped, not enough to rescue anybody from the image. There were still images from other angles, but none complete. Every camera had arrived with a hunger of its own. No one thanked Mara. That was almost a relief. Gratitude would have felt obscene with one berth covered and half the ship smelling of smoke. The inquiry officer said the channel would continue under review, with stricter escorts, narrower permissions, and a lovely new phrase about provisional neutrality that would sound expensive in donor briefings. Mara heard temporary restriction on her own role before anyone said it. She heard liability. She heard necessary distance. Paper was polite, still. Rook sighed under the table, a rough little sound, and Mara put her boot beside his paw so he could smell she had not left. Eli caught her eye once across the room and gave the smallest shrug, the kind that said he had survived and intended to be annoying about it later. Samir sat beyond, the glass with Naddy, wrapped in a clean blanket. Face turned away from the hallway camera. Living proof. Living burden, not a file. Not a clean answer. The footage froze again on Mara's hand in Haroon's coat, the logo behind her, the whole world starting late. Tomas had already asked which clinics would be shorted first, and nobody had answered quickly. That silence had weight. The inquiry officer closed the folder. "You understood how this would look," she said. It was not accusation exactly. Worse, it was a fair question. Mara looked at the frozen frame, at the blood-dark smear under the printed dove, at Rook breathing hard in his sleep. She thought of the container gap, the wrong wakes, the boy's hands twisted in cold packing cloth. Tomas letting supplies go, Eli pinned and still reaching, Haddad holding the ship, together by sheer disciplined fury. She could have said context. She could have said timing. She could have said the camera lied by omission, which was true and useless and already too much like a speech. Outside, beyond the wall, forklifts moved what remained of the medicine toward trucks that would carry less than promised to people who would never know why. The channel had not closed. It had not survived whole either. Mara rested her sore arm against the rough edge of the table and gave the only answer that still belonged to the bodies, not the frame. Because they were still breathing.